In this video, we're going to be talking about inequalities instead of equations. The difference between an inequality and an equation is that an equation has an equal sign, inequalities have less thans or greater thans. And when you go to graph an inequality, you have to look at the sign, so the inequality symbol itself, so less than and greater than, compared to less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. If your symbol or your inequality symbol contains an equal sign with it, that means the endpoint itself is included, so we're going to fill in our circle. If, on the other hand, like these two, we do not have an equal sign with it, we use what we call an open circle to show our endpoint. So let's take a look at a couple of these. So these first ones ask us to graph. And we're supposed to graph the inequality, x is less than 6. So when we look at this inequality symbol, there is no equal sign, which means we're going to use the open circle. So we find the number 6 on our number line, and we make an open circle to show our endpoint. And then we have to graph all the numbers that are less than 6. So less than numbers are on the left-hand side. They're the smaller numbers, things that are smaller than 6. And if you look at the inequality, as long as your variable is on the left, if your inequality, if you kind of think of that like it's the point of an arrow, it shows you which way you need to graph. So this matches this inequality symbol, the less than symbol. So from the 6, I'm going to graph all of the stuff on my number line. So these are all the numbers that are less than 6. So 5 is less than 6, 4, 3, all of these numbers are less than 6. All right, in this second one, we have a greater than or equal to, which means we can also use -3 as one of our solutions. So we're going to find -3 on the number line, and since it includes the or equal to, we're going to use a filled in circle this time to show we're allowed to use that number as one of our solutions. And this time it is also greater than or equal to, so the things that are bigger than -3. So bigger than -3 is pointing this way. And if we look at the inequality symbol, and we kind of think of it like it's an arrow, it's pointing to the right, so we shade to the right. Sometimes we're going to have to solve our inequality first. To solve our inequality, we are going to solve it just like if it was an equation. So if this was an equal to instead of a less than, we would take and we would subtract 1 from both sides. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And that would leave us 2x is less than 8. And then to get rid of the 2, we would divide by 2. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. So x would be less than 4. If we had to graph that, on our number line we would find 4. We would use an open circle, and our inequality is showing pointing to the left, to the stuff smaller, so we would graph over here. All right, for this one, we're going to start by adding 2, because we need to get the -3x by itself. So -3x, we bring this inequality symbol down to use for the next step. So we still have a less than or equal to, and now we have a 9. And then to get the x by itself, we're going to divide both sides by -3. Now, the one tricky thing we have to remember, when you divide by a negative, it changes our sign. So our 9 was positive. By dividing by this -3, we're going to get a negative answer. And since we switched signs, we have to switch our inequality to the other direction. So x would be, but instead of less than or equal to, we're now going to turn it around and make it a greater than or equal to -3. All right, this one is called a compound inequality. And if you notice, in our compound inequality, let's make this a little bit bigger, we have one inequality symbol here and we have another one here. Compound means more than one. So we are going to solve for x. Our x is in here in the middle. So we have one section on the left, one in the middle, and one on the right. So to solve this for x, if we just kind of pretended like one of our piece, like maybe the -7 wasn't there for a minute, we would start by adding 5 to both sides. Now the only difference here is we now have a third side here, so we're also going to add 5 onto that part as well. So we have 3 parts, so we add 1, 2, 3, 5s, because we're trying to get this x by itself in the middle. So on the left we would have -2, in the middle 2x, and on the right we would have 13. So let's see if we can get rid of that number here. And let's get our 14 in here. All right, so 14. And then we have 2x in the middle, so we need to divide by 2 to get just the x. And remember, we now have 3 pieces. So -1 is on the left, x is in the middle, and 7 is on the right, which means x has to be something more than -1, but it has to stop when x reaches 7. All right, this last piece, we're going to write an inequality this time. So again, we need to look at our circle and what number it's at. So we're going to have an x and a -4. And I have an open circle, which means my -4 isn't actually part of my answer, but it's all the stuff that's over here on the right. And again, if we look at our arrow and our inequality are going to match. So we're just going to take this and move it up here. And since we have an open circle, it's just going to be greater than. All right, if we look at this one, we have a 2. So we're going to use x and 2. This time our circle is filled in, which means the 2 is included in our set. So that's going to get the or equal to. And if we look at our inequality down here and match it to our arrow, all right, then we're just going to bring this over here. But on this one, since it was a closed-in circle, we're going to include the or equal to. All right, so a few things to remember about inequalities. You're going to solve them exactly like you would solve an equation. You keep the inequality symbol all the way till the end, unless at the very last step you're multiplying or dividing by a negative. And if you do, you're going to flip the inequality symbol around. If you have a compound inequality, there's 3 parts. So just remember what you do. You want to isolate your variable in the middle. You're going to have 3 different parts. And we're going to end up with 3 parts when we get to the end. And when we're writing inequalities, look at where the number is, open or closed, and what direction the arrow is pointing.